As we come on the air to start the week, we are exactly 99 days away from the election. You might say Donald Trump has 99 problems, and the midterms are one of them. And that's even according to his own advisors and allies. I'm going to show you some of the new numbers, including a special look at why both parties agree on one thing. If the elections were held tonight, Democrats would be in the lead position to retake power. So on the one hand, 99 days is still an eternity in politics. But on the other hand, both parties, their candidates, even some Trump advisors, are absorbing that reality and reacting. Now, we begin, though, with the related fact that Donald Trump continues to bleed support from his own base. This is different, I'll just tell you, from the midterm projections, because that has to do with who will actually turn out and what else will happen. And we're going to get to that with some very special guests tonight. But our lead story is the toxic combination of Donald Trump's ongoing governing problems. The high prices he hasn't stemmed, an Epstein scandal that won't go away even with Republicans controlling subpoena power, and now a war that continues long after Donald Trump said it would be done. Here's the new polling. Majorities disapprove of Trump's handling of many top issues, 65% on this economy, a higher 71% when you ask just about the high prices and inflation that he has not only failed to stem, but the war has, of course, noticeably exacerbated. And then the war itself, that is the policy, not just how it's affecting your gas prices and pocketbook, another 63% disapproving there. MS Now has reporting with sources saying that Trump's own advisors have basically conceded that things are so bad they must, or at least are, allowing Republican candidates to distance themselves from Trump. An operative saying you're not going to have candidates running out to defend the president's handling of the economy or the war. Republican insiders nervous about what some call a downright scary enthusiasm gap, with conservatives just not excited to turn out for Donald Trump. That's Washington Post reporting. The apathy reaching deep into the Republicans' base, spreading to the party's, quote, most consistent voters. Now, this is a real thing. If you've been watching our coverage here in the summer, which is a time period where sometimes people understandably take a break from politics or news or look away, I have shared a point that was as true last week as is true this week as we start a new political week. There are certain things that Donald Trump can spin. Lord knows that he has had success telling his voters and his base all sorts of spin, myths, sometimes outright lies about things, and they seem to kind of go along with it. And then there are things over in reality. Obviously, I just showed you some, the reaction to the gas prices and the inflation, another Mideast forever war, which he promised he wouldn't start. And in the reality side of the equation, it's much harder for Trump to just lie his way through. And so take some groups that have been predisposed to give Trump a chance and liked some of the things he said to them. Even they, like young male conservative leaning voters, are turning away. And you don't just have to look at the polling I mentioned or our reporting tonight. This is a reality issue that's gotten to the point that they talk about it openly over on Fox, where Tomi Lahren said young men are turning on MAGA and Trump.
I think you're going to see especially maybe some young men who are frustrated that things are costing a lot. Maybe they can't get a high-paying job. Again, there's a lot of issues that Republicans have yet to address. I think that they can, but you have to answer something with something. You can't answer something with nothing. And you're going to see a lot of people that are not happy with the status quo.
That's how it sounds over there, this disconnect. Politico also reporting that a quarter of people who voted for Trump believe the working class got substantial breaks from Trump's tax law, which Politico writes that signals how low public opinion is of the bill among his own base. That's to say nothing of the independent economists who warned about the cost and the deficit, or liberals, progressives, labor households, and others who say it just continues to widen the Wall Street gap at a time when people need real support. Another poll found, I should say, that about a fifth of Republicans, 18%, say they're just financially worse off since Trump returned to office. Now, that may sound like a small portion, but if that fifth of Republicans doesn't want to vote for more of this, more of the same, well, that's a huge midterm problem. Another humiliation coming out of that White House Correspondents' Dinner where Trump gave his big speech. We're not going to show you much of that, but then he also had to sit through and watch as Wall Street Journal reporters were feted and awarded for their past independent, no-holds-bar journalism and coverage of the Epstein scandal, including the links to Trump, The footage you have here is how the president had to sit through that, all dressed up, all ready to have his big night, and then either he or his aides didn't get around to figuring out that this moment was coming as he tried to kind of laugh off and shrug off the fact that he was sitting through listening to awards for the journalists who covered and documented that Trump signed this letter to Epstein for his birthday. That reporting was part of the onslaught that led to the release and the pressure of the Epstein files. I can mention that Donald Trump has vociferously denied being the author of that letter. They even sued the Journal over it. But the award and the legal status thus far has fallen much more on the verified side of the Journal's reporting and not the president's denial of his links and apparent praise of Epstein on his birthday. I want to bring in Jason Johnson, politics professor with Morgan State University, MS Now political analyst, as we start the week. Welcome back.
Good to be here, Ari.
Great to have you. I mentioned this gap because the reality seems to keep catching up with him. And even over the weekend in that sort of event, he had his agenda, the speech that we didn't find super newsworthy, so we're not playing much of it here on this program. But he still had to sit through, again, reality. The Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch, winning in court thus far to vindicate their reporting about him and Epstein. Your view on the reality of all this?
Well, the reality of all this is that, whatever metaphor you want to use, Donald Trump is not as popular as he once was. He's not able to bring back the old hits. He's not able to intimidate people either in the press or in politics or even voters the way that he used to. He's not coming back for some big reunion tour over the summer. So him having to sit there and not only hear people report on his misdeeds and his association with misdeeds and get awarded for it, but also having his own party members not back him up and not stand for him is an indicator of how weakened he is with only 99 days before the election.
99, as you know, special number to many of us. I want to put up more of this Fox polling, Jason, because you really see where the preferences fall. And this is not the automatic for the Democrats. They had struggled in 24 to get out their message on some of these issues. So when you see the trust going towards the Dems, or perhaps you can tell us if you think it's also a rejection of Trump, but inequality, a 20-plus edge, healthcare, inflation, a 10 edge, the economy, if you just say it writ large, it starts to shrink a little bit. Trump has had people who think that he's a businessman on that. Foreign policy, if you ask it that way, it kind of doesn't bring up the war, +7. And then you get to the areas where security and crime, Trump is holding, but holding an edge that's far less than he used to have. What do you see in these current numbers from Fox?
What I see is Donald Trump's inability to continue communicating with voters. Remember, we've talked about this already for several months. To continue with the metaphor, whenever Trump is asked about the economy, whenever he's talked about gas prices or inflation, he's basically saying, hey, if you're having gas problems, I feel bad for you, son, because he doesn't really care. You look at what happened this weekend after giving a speech where, again, he doesn't get a lot of laughs. The White House correspondence doesn't get a tremendous amount of attention. What is he doing today? He's posting Rick and Morty memes on his social media, right? This is someone who has lost their ability to deliver messages to voters. And when that happens, people are just going to vote and they're going to do polls based on their lived experience. And their lived experience is completely separate from what they're hearing from the Republican Party. And Donald Trump can no longer control the narrative.
Rick and Morty, a great cartoon. But in the world of that cartoon, as well as its creator, Dan Harmon, is pretty critical of Trump, greed, right-wing excess. I mean, it's not a political cartoon in its frame, but it's just funny. He's not exactly reaching for a Kid Rock meme. It's the problem he's had with a lot of other creatives and artists where he tries to say, oh, maybe I'm cool like them, and I want to be in that conversation, just like with FIFA and soccer. And then he's tempting them to punch back. We'll watch for that. But it brings me to the next thing I wanted to show you, which is Larry Kudlow is a longtime economic politico. He worked for Trump. Talking about the charisma or riz, as they say, that's lacking. Here's what he observes.
Call it swag, swagger, riz, aura, or just plain messaging, but the GOP doesn't have it. You're bungling everything. Nothing is getting done. Your messaging is non-existent. You've lost your swag, your swagger, your riz, or whatever the young people say. No one knows what the heck you're doing, sir. They have no idea.
Jason?
And that's Larry Kudlow. And here's the thing, Ari. I went in preparation for tonight. I went back and actually looked at the Republican Party platform from 2024. Right there in the first opening section, it talks about how wars are a bad idea. Trump was going to end unnecessary wars because wars lead to inflation. In their own words, the Republicans are not following their own party platform.